Good day, this is Jove Aguas, and welcome to my lectures in modern philosophy. For this lecture, I will be presenting a short introduction on empiricism. So, first, let's discuss the meaning of empiricism. Empiricism is a theory that states that experience, rather than reason, is the main source of our knowledge, and that sense is the main foundation of knowledge. Now, this is opposed to the position of rationalism, which states that reason is the main source of knowledge. The general thesis of empiricism, however, has many different interpretations and some modifications from different philosophers, all from starting from the ancient period down even to the contemporary period. Philosophers who have been labeled as empiricists differ in their views and positions. So while Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas can be considered as empiricists in some sense, their positions are very much different from the position of Locke and Hume during the modern times. But of course, we can say that the thoughts of Aristotle and Aquinas provided us with some inputs as to the nature of empirical knowledge. The word empiricism is derived from the Greek term imperia, and the Latin translation of which is experientia, from which the English experience was also derived. For Aristotle, experience is the unorganized product of our sense perception and memory. Yes, it provides us with information or data coming from the outside world, but the images coming the from sense perception are not organized or systematized yet. It will take the intellect to organize all this varied information coming from the senses. So memory is required so that what is perceived may be retained in the mind. Generally, when we say that we have learned something from experience, we mean we have come to know of it by the use of our senses. We have experience when we are sufficiently aware of what we have discovered in this way. So we can also connect experience to sensations, to feelings, and so on. So these are experiences, and in which to perceive something involves having experience. So these are experiences that happen to us suggest that experience is passive. In a way, experience is just received by our senses. However, it is undeniable that experience is a source of knowledge. The main question is whether knowledge depends ultimately in the use of the senses and on what is discovered through them. Now, of course, the empiricist would insist that ultimately our knowledge depends on our senses because it is from them that we are able to acquire information or data from the outside world. Now, the common view is that the senses do provide us with knowledge of some sort. And most prop people, when philosophizing, adopt this kind of empiricist view. However, some have generalized such position into the thesis that all knowledge, all knowledge comes from experience. Its extreme form claims that no source other than experience provides us knowledge at all. One reason for maintaining that all knowledge is dependent on experience would be that we can have no ideas or concepts that are not derived from experience. It maintains that all concepts are a posteriori, meaning they are all based on experience. Whether or not the truths which can be asserted by means of these concepts are themselves a posteriori. However, There are certain truths that we know without resorting immediately to experience for their validation, because their truth may depend solely on the logical relations between the ideas involved, although the ideas may themselves be derived from experience. So, if all our ideas are so derived, then knowledge of any sort must be dependent on sense experience. It must have come from sense experience in some ways. Therefore, not all knowledge is derived immediately from experience, but all knowledge is dependent on experience, at least in the sense that all the materials for which knowledge is acquired, they are ultimately derived from experience. So Aristotle and St. Thomas hold this view of kind of empiricism. They thought that all our concepts are derived from experience, and that there is nothing in the intellect which was not previously in the senses. So there are many different interpretations of empiricism, or how they interpret experience vis-a-vis knowledge. Now, the general emphasis that all knowledge is derived from experience can therefore be interpreted in the following sense. Number one, all that we know is directly concerned with sense experience or derived from it by strictly experiential means. That is, through learning, association, or inductive inference. So all that we know are directly concerned with experience. So from the data that we got or we get from the external world, for example, the colors of the objects, the physical appearance of the object, the sound, the taste, etc., they're all coming from experience, in that we are able to learn something new. We associate many things because of them. And of course, by way of inductive inference, meaning inference from the individual or particular experiences, we are able to know. The next interpretation could be that all that we know is dependent on sense experience, in that all the materials for knowledge are directly derived from sense experience. It says that all our all that we know is dependent on our sense experience, meaning there's nothing that we can know outside of them. Everything is dependent on sense experience. Well, in the first one, we'll just say, well, they they are acquired through experiential means, meaning by learning, by association, by inductive inference. Now, this position tells us that everything is dependent on sense experience, not just by some experiential means. The third is that all that we know is dependent on sense perception, in that even though we can know some things a priori, so here this is a less strict position of empiricism, because it acknowledges that there are some things that we can know outside of experience, meaning there are some things that we can know by a priori, but still it is dependent on sense experience. Now, let's contrast empiricism and rationalism, because obviously when we talk of rationalism, we always correlate or relate it with empiricism and vice versa. By stressing experience, empiricism is therefore opposed to the claims of authority, intuition, imaginative conjecture, and abstract or theoretical or systematic reasoning as the source of reliable belief. So this is fundamentally or basically opposed to the position of rationalism. So a rationalist theory of meaning asserts that there are concepts that are not derived from our senses, or that they are that experiential features of the world, such as cause, for example, or identity, concept of circle, triangularity, and all these other concepts, they are all a priori in the traditional sense. They are part of mind's innate or natural equipment. So they are not a posteriori because they're meaning a priori they are already part of the system, or they are already in the mind. They're innate in the mind. So it is opposed. Rational empiricism is opposed to that kind of thinking. Rationalism, on the other hand, holds that there are beliefs that are a priori, and they depend on our thought for their justification. And that belief, for example, the belief that everything must have sufficient reason, or that a process cannot exist by itself but must concur or occur with some substances. Such beliefs can either arise from intellectual intuition or from direct apprehension of self evident truth or from purely deductive reasoning. Of course, the empiricists would not accept that. They would deny that there is self evident truth because that would mean that senses or experience is no longer necessary to understand this truth. But they claim that everything, truth included, is acquired through the sense experience. So they deny innate ideas, they deny the self evident truth because everything must be dependent on sense experience. Okay. Now let's go to some forms of empiricism. The first form or type of empiricism that we can think about is materialism. Materialism, in its earliest form, was taught by the ancient atomists Democritus and Leucippus, Epicurus, and Lucretius. They reduced the sum of all reality to atoms and motions. They taught that through experience, knowledge is constituted. Now, it's not to say that materialism is, or the whole of materialism in the strict sense, is a kind of empiricism. But there are those materialists who would say that it is through experience that our knowledge is constituted because the materials, the physical, can only be perceived through sense perception. Such knowledge of these physical objects is generated by images reflected from material objects through our sensory organs and into the mind. So the soul, as a more complex or finest atoms, perceives not the objects but their images. This is a kind of empiricism in the sense that since they believe that only matter exists, then matter can only be known through sense experience because matter is something that is physical. It has physical qualities, physical characteristics, and the physical qualities or characteristics can only be perceived by the senses. So, for modern materialists, knowledge is accounted either by cerebral secretion or by motion. Others look on it as a physiological process affected by certain cells in the brain. Now, the second form of empiricism is sensism. All materialists, we can say, are sensists, though not vice versa. All materialists are sensists because they believe that knowledge of the material world can only be possible through sense perception. But not all sensists are materialists. By denying any essential difference between sensations and ideas, ideas meaning intellectual states, sensism logically involves materialism. Okay? So, but materialism can be traced in the thoughts of the Greek philosophers Empedocles and Protagoras, and can also be seen in the thoughts of modern thinkers like Bacon and Hobbes. It's not to say that for the senses, only the materials exist. The materials can be perceived by the senses. In that way, all materialists are senses. But the sensist does not believe that only the materials exist. There are other things that exist, not just the material. However, since these non material things cannot be perceived, therefore they cannot be known what they really are. One example is Locke. Locke is an empiricist. So he believes that everything that can be known, or we know because of our senses, because of our sense experience. What about the substance? The substance is something that is immaterial, it is something abstract. While Locke does not deny the substance, the existence of the substance, or the immaterial substance, he said, well, because we cannot perceive the substance, therefore we cannot know it. We cannot perceive the substance, therefore we don't know what the substance really is, without denying that there is a substance. Of course, David Hume would be different because he will bring this empiricist principle to its extreme skeptical position. Okay, we are going to discuss that in the other discussions. Now, the last type of empiricists are the positivists. Positivists like Comte, and they do not deny the supersensible, meaning they do not deny the immaterial, but they declare it as unknowable. In this sense, there is a close connection between positivism and sensism. For them, the one source of cognition is sense experience. Aside from sense experience, of course, you have experiment and induction from phenomena. John Stuart Mill, who followed Hume, reduces all knowledge to series of conscious states linked by empirical associations and enlarged by the inductive process. So for the positivist, only those things that can be uh, perceived, the phenomena, they are the things that have positive value. All the rest, they don't have positive values at all. So, like for example, you say God. Well, we may believe in God, but because we cannot trace it back to a phenomenon, meaning to a sense experience, therefore the idea of a God is a non-value knowledge, meaning it does not have any value at all. It's not something positive in a sense. So the mind has no certitude of an external world, for example, but only of the permanent possibility of sensations and antecedent uh, and anticipated feelings. Another philosopher, Spencer, makes all knowledge relative. So the actual existence of things is the persistence in consciousness. Consciousness contains only subjective feelings. So the relative supposes the absolute, but the latter is unknowable to us, meaning the absolute is unknowable to us. It is the object of faith and religion, and therefore we cannot have a positive knowledge of all these things. So all things, mine included, have resulted from a cosmical process of mechanical evolution wherein they are still uh, involved. And therefore, all concepts and principles are in a continuous flux. Now, let's go to a very important point in empiricism, and that is the concept of tabula rasa. So, we are going to discuss the concept of tabula rasa and relate that to knowledge. Again, St. Thomas and Aristotle thought that all our concepts are derived from experience, and that there is nothing in the intellect that was not previously in our senses. Now, this position consequently resulted to the concept of tabula rasa, the mind as a blank tablet or a clean slate. Because if all that are in the intellect pass through the senses prior to sense perception or sense experience. Therefore, the mind is empty. There is nothing in the mind. It is a tabula rasa. It is a clean slate. Now, this concept of tabula rasa is a central concept in modern empiricism or in British empiricism. But it was actually first developed as early as the 11th century by the Persian philosopher Avicenna, who was himself influenced by Aristotle and who himself also influenced St. Thomas Aquinas. So, following Aristotle, Avicenna argued that knowledge is attained through empirical familiarity with objects in the world, and from which one, or the mind, abstracts universal concepts, which can then be further developed through a syllogistic method of reasoning. Now, this kind of thinking influenced St. Thomas Aquinas. So we can see the transition, the flow of the ideas from Aristotle to Avicenna and then to Aquinas. Now, we are not saying here that Aquinas influenced the British empiricists, but certainly they must have known the philosophy of Aristotle, and that's where they base their theories. Now, in modern empiricism, Francis Bacon can be considered as the first to have implied it when he developed his inductive method for scientific inquiry in his work Novum Organum. Thomas Hobbes also implied this idea of the tabula rasa when he asserted that ideas come from sense experience. So you see, different philosophers are expressing a general opinion about sense experience, from Aristotle to Avicenna to Aquinas to Bacon, Hobbes, and then finally John Locke. So the first explicit formulation of empiricism was by the British philosopher John Locke. In his essay concerning human understanding, he said that the mind is a tabula rasa on which experiences leave their marks, and therefore he denied that humans have innate ideas or that uh, anything is knowable without reference to experience. This is actually Locke's reply to the notion of innate ideas, which Rene Descartes discussed in his Meditations on the First Philosophy. However, Locke also held that some knowledge, like for example, the knowledge of God's existence, could be arrived at through intuition and reasoning alone. So, as we have already mentioned, uh, Locke, while saying that everything comes from sense experience, does not deny that a substance like God exists. Only that we cannot really know it because what God really is, because God does not appear to us through our sense experience. But of course, he does not deny that, well, we can know God's existence, that not the nature of God, but God's existence through intuition and through reasoning. So that tells us a lot. We cannot say that an empiricist is an atheist because it does the empiricist does not totally deny God's existence. At most, they can say that, well, we cannot truly adequately know the nature of God because God does not appear to us as a phenomenon. So, continuing with Locke, Locke derives all simple ideas from external experience, sensation. So, sensation is the external experience. And all compound ideas, like the modes, the substances, the relations, from internal experience, which he calls reflection. So, there are two experiences: external experience by way of sensation and internal experience by way of reflection. Of course, we are going to discuss this in detail when we discuss the philosophy of Locke. Substance and cause are simply associations of subjective phenomena, and universal ideas are merely mental figments, meaning they are formed by the mind based on the impressions or based on our experiences. Locke admits the existence, though he denies the demonstrability in man of an immaterial and immortal principle like the soul or God. Because, again, the immaterial, immortal principle like the soul or the spirit well being like God do not appear to us in sense experience. The Irish bishop, philosopher George Berkeley accepts the teaching of Locke that ideas are only transfigured sensations. Berkeley subjectivizes not only the sensible or secondary qualities of matter, meaning the proper sensible, for example, of color and sound, as Locke had done, but also the primary qualities, meaning the common sensible, like extension, space, etc., which Locke held to be objective. So, for Locke, there is an objective, meaning by objective, they exist in the object. We can actually perceive extension, space, etc. But Berkeley denies this, that there is that objective existence of certain qualities like extension in space. So Berkeley is not concerned that Locke's open, I'm sorry, but Berkeley is more concerned about the possibility of Locke's view, the possibility of opening the door that could lead to a kind of atheism. So if there's something that does not depend on our perception, then the assumption of Berkeley is that it could lead to a kind of denial of the existence of the spiritual being or of God. Therefore, in his treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge, he gave a different interpretation of empiricism, something that is really different from the other empiricist philosophers like Hobbes, like Locke, and most especially Hume. So he said that things only exist because they're either the result of being perceived or by virtue of the fact that they are an entity doing the perceiving. Meaning, things exist if they are perceived or if they are the ones perceiving. So, everything exists because of perception. Because of perception. There is the only thing that exists objectively is the one who ultimately perceives everything. And everything, all else, aside from this perceiver, they exist by the very fact that they are perceived by the perceiver. So, he argued that the continued existence of things results from the perception of a being. And that ultimate being who perceives everything and therefore sustains the existence of everything except himself is God. God is the ultimate perceiver. So Berkeley therefore denies the objective basis of the universal ideas, and indeed of the whole material universe. The reality of things, he places it in their being perceived, and this perceivedness is effected in the mind of God, not by the object or by any subject. So, the famous line, esse re est percipi. The object exists because it is perceived, or to exist is to be perceived. Still, he retains the substance reality of the human soul and of beings, no? Spirits generally, including God. But the human soul and even the spirits, they exist because they are perceived by God. So the physical world, so you would say, well, my laptop exists because I perceive it. But how about if I am no longer existing? Does the laptop cease to exist? No. It continues to exist because there is still a being, God, who continuously perceives everything, meaning it perceives the material world, including man himself. Now, the Scottish philosopher David Hume argued that all knowledge, all human knowledge, can be divided into two categories: the relations of ideas, for example, the mathematical and logical propositions, and the matters of fact, for example, the propositions involving some contingent observation of some objects, meaning physical objects. So, for example, we say that the sun rises from the east. So how do we know them? Well, it's a matter of fact. It's uh, based on our sense experience, and those ideas are derived from our impressions or sensations. So, in the face of this, Hume argued that even the most basic beliefs about the natural world, or even the existence of the self, cannot be conclusively established by reason. But we accept them anyway because of their basis in instinct and custom. Meaning, we tend to believe that the sun rises from the east because it has been rising from the east ever since. Now, Hume would actually debunk the idea of causality as based on the necessary connection between the cause and the effect. We are going to discuss that when we discuss David Hume. Now, just to continue this general introduction, Hume agrees with his two empiricist predecessors, Locke and Berkeley, in teaching that the mind knows only its own subjective organic impressions, whereof ideas are but the images. Those that are beyond the senses are therefore unknowable. So that includes the principle of causality, or meaning the principle of causality is resolved into a mere feeling of successiveness of phenomena. So if you see a ball hitting another ball and then the second ball moves because of the first ball, what you are actually perceiving is the succession of events. Ball 1 hitting ball 2 and then ball 2 moves. So this is just a succession of events or of phenomena. Its necessity is reduced to subjective feeling resulting from the uniform association that experience no, that we experience in our consciousness. So the spiritual essence or substantial being or the soul is also dissipated into a series of conscious events or conscious states. So David Hume developed the initial empiricist principles of Locke to its extreme. To its extreme. That extreme is a kind of skepticism. Skepticism of the existence of substance and the principle of causality. So that ends this introduction to empiricism. I will be discussing the main ideas of the philosophers I mentioned, Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, in my succeeding lectures. Thank you very much for listening.